Dominic, there is an enormous case taking place in America at the moment. It's getting a huge amount of attention. Just describe how big it is and what's been unfolding.
This is the Department of Justice, which is responsible for policing most of US competition law, taking on one of the really big players in Silicon Valley. And it signaled really when the case started a few years ago, it signaled really a new willingness by the Department of Justice to consider the very strong position that just a handful of companies had on the commanding heights of the online economy. And the first of those that it went to was the power that Google has in internet search. And the reason everybody was so interested in this case is that it was thought likely to set a precedent as to what would happen with a whole bunch of other cases that the DOJ and another US investigatory and prosecuting body, the Federal Trade Commission, might take, and in fact hasn't already now started, against the other large Silicon Valley firms.
There's been so much coverage of this recently, but just describe some of the scenes because some of the people who are having to give evidence are worth billions.
Well, they certainly are, and in fact, uh, the market that we're talking about is certainly worth trillions, if not billions, which is why so many people were focused on it. We had the chief executive of Microsoft, Satya Nadella. We had Sundar Pichai, who's the chief executive of Alphabet, and really, it was a casting, a Hollywood casting director's dream for all the big names in Silicon Valley lining up to talk about this for and against, and indeed just to inform it as well, to inform the decision. And it was also quite a high-profile case for a guy called Jonathan Kantar, who's the Assistant Attorney General for Competition at the Department for Justice. He's become very much the kind of poster boy is not the right word, but the figurehead for, or one of the two figureheads in this new, more aggressive approach by the US authorities to these big online firms.
So there's a roll call of Silicon Valley, as you said, sort of being called to give evidence in this case. Why is it Google that they've gone after? I mean, what are the allegations against them?
Well, it's a competition case, so the allegations are not necessarily that they've done anything illegal
Hmm.
or criminal. The Department of Justice says that Google has an overly strong position in internet search. So it accounts for about 90% of all internet searches in the US. It's a slightly larger share in the UK, depending upon which set of analysis you look at. So the DOJ was arguing A, that it had market share, but B, that it preserved that market share through unfair tactics. In particular, by making sure that its search engine was the default search engine on many browsers and any kind of device in which you
Hmm.
access the internet. In
That does feel
particular,
like it happens. When you open a page on your computer, it will automatically go to Google.
exactly, and the way they made that happen, or the way they make that happen, is that Google pays the makers of these devices through which you can access the internet to make it the default browser. And in the trial, it came out that Google was paying billions of dollars a year to secure this, and with Apple to make it the default browser on the iPhone browser, to make it the default search engine, excuse me, on the iPhone browser, Safari, they were paying roughly $18 billion a year. So that is big.
Eye-watering sums.
That is big money to preserve a dominant position in the market. And then
Hmm.
they went on to talk about other markets in which Google dominated, particularly online advertising. And they said that Google had, in essence, cornered the market in online advertising, so that it was the gatekeeper and the auctioneer, and really controlled the whole, or a large part of the online ad space, which now, of course, is by far the world's largest advertising market.
Of course. And Dominic, we should say, we're used to thinking of Google as a search engine. Just how vast is the company, though? What else does it do?
Well, Google is now part of Alphabet, which is a holding company which which has Google as its main operating subsidiary, but also has things like, well, Gmail, for example, a ubiquitous email
Mm.
system. It has Waze, the navigation service, Waymo, a driverless car thing. It has a very big cloud computing arm, all under all under this holding company, Alphabet. And it's one of the big five in the internet. I didn't actually have. I think it's the third most valuable company on the US stock exchange at the moment. It changes between third and fourth. It's an extremely valuable company, and it has extremely valuable properties inside it.
And Dominic, this case has been going on for a little while now, but there's been more movement in the last few days. Just tell us what's happened.
Well, the case was decided in the Department of Justice's favour a couple of months ago. The judge came out and said, "Yes, I agree with the DOJ's contention that Google has an anti-competitive position in the following markets, in the relevant markets." What's happening now is a second hearing about what the remedies might be, how you might fix that, and the Department of Justice has put forward its set of proposed remedies and it will be up to the judge to decide which ones go ahead. And that will go all the way from the breakup of Alphabet so that Google becomes a separate company and maybe a breakup of bits of Google as well,
Mm.
all the way down to much less intrusive remedies such as behavioral changes for Google so that it allows other people access to its technologies. For example, it agrees not to buy any more advertising technology firms, or it agrees to sell some. All these kinds of things are possible. And the big question is, and we won't know the answer probably till August next year, is what will the judge decide to do?
And Dominic, this is all, affecting a huge company in Silicon Valley. Why should we care so much about it?
Well, Google is in part is in our lives every day. It is one of the monopolies you deal with. You think about natural monopolies like Heathrow Airport or Thames Water, where you don't really have a choice of provider. If you want to take water in London, you have to take it from Thames Water. Uh, kind of. You do really. And if you want to fly out of an airport in the west of London that's only 15 miles out of the centre of London and has good international access, and the right kind of routes that you want, 18 flights a day to New York, well, no one's going to make another Heathrow. So these are kind of natural monopolies which are based on ownership of particular physical properties. But Google is an online monopoly, it's a virtual monopoly, and you deal with it all the time. You never really think about it. Also, the other thing which you might get into is the difficulties of applying competition law to these kinds of monopolies, where you might argue, well, listen, I can work out that Heathrow has a monopoly because the prices there are too high. I don't like paying that much for parking because there's nowhere else to park apart from Heathrow. But with Google, the service is free, and it's much better than anything that went before. It's much better than a phone book, than a map, than a physical map. Um,
Yeah.
it's doing all these things with no obvious harm to the consumer, and that makes it quite tricky for competition authorities to get involved.
That's the story from the Times and the Sunday Times. Listen and follow wherever you get your podcasts.